Good morning. I have lots of paper today, and let me first apologize for that. I normally work off more of an outline, but I had a lot of things that I want to read today, and I wanted to get it right, so I apologize for that. And honestly, when you get to be my age, large print is your best friend. So, as I was growing up, all of my heroes in the scriptures were generally men of great courage, men warriors. Helaman and the 2,000 young men, that was a great story. And the story of Moroni, when he rips his coat and he makes a flag and he uses this as a banner to rally the troops. And my all-time favorite, and I apologize up front for this, but Ammon, I don't know if you remember Ammon, but Ammon is one of the sons of Mosiah, went to the Lamanites to preach the gospel and became a servant to the king. And he was tending the king's flocks, and some thieves came, and Ammon whipped out his sword and he whacked off all their arms. That was the coolest thing ever. And then, of course, there's always Daniel, in the lion's den, another young man that was strong in the faith that I admired. Today I want to talk about different heroes in the Bible, one in particular. In the 17th chapter of 1 Samuel, we read the story of David and Goliath, and I know you all know that story, and I'm not going to repeat it, and I'm not going to read it. And right now there's this thing going around, and if you're in any of the circles I am, there's this talk about David and Goliath and facing the giants, and be like David and face the giant. Well, if you remember, Goliath was cursing the Israelites, and he was cursing God, and David took him down for that. And I say David, but with God's help, God was probably the one leading the charge there. But we're not all giant killers, are we? We're not all going to go out and face big tech with slings and arrows and whatever we can. We're not giant killers. But there's many stories in the Bible about people who faced their own giants and didn't do it with stones and slings. And this one individual, he started out as a very humble background. He was a fisherman, and he put his foot in his mouth many times. And even when things looked hopeless, he denied Christ. Let me give you some examples. You remember when Jesus was talking about how it's easier to go through the eye of a camel and all that? Here's what Peter said about that. In Matthew chapter 7, Peter says, "Behold, we've left everything and followed you. What then will there be for us?" Kind of sounds a bit like whining to me. And remember when Jesus took Peter and James up to the top of the mountain and they met Moses and Elijah? Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 tabernacles here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." I've always wondered if everyone on the mountaintop turned and looked at him and it just got kind of awkward for a moment, and then they moved on with their conversation. And of course, we all remember what happened when he tried to walk on water. Peter said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." And Peter got out of the boat and he walked on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, "Lord, save me." Doesn't sound like a hero to me, does it? And when Jesus was speaking of his own death, Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. And I can't imagine anybody rebuking Jesus, but he did. And he said, "God forbid it, Lord. This shall never happen to you." And he said, "Even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you." And all of the disciples said the same thing. And my all-time favorite quote from Peter, I'm going fishing. That was the best. I've always thought, when I think about Peter, I've always thought that he came across a little arrogant, almost like a bully in trying to get his way. You know, he kind of bull in the china closet kind of a guy. And I think I've come to understand that Peter was very, very insecure. And he really struggled to understand. There was so much information happening and so much going on that he had trouble taking it all in. And a lot of things were, that Jesus talked about in the scriptures, and even to us sometimes, it's just beyond our comprehension, and I think it was for him. And I think one of the reasons why I identify so much with Peter is because I'm like that too. I'm very insecure about some things. I'm not always bold in what I say. I often put my foot in my mouth and say or do the wrong thing. Don't always know what to do. Don't know when to do it. And so I can relate to Peter. And I think that's why a lot of these things were left in the scriptures about some of his, not failures, but some of his weaknesses. I think they were left in the scriptures so that we can identify with that. I love Helaman, and I love the sons of Mosiah, but that's not me. That's not who I'll ever be. I'm not that strong of an individual. But I can be like Peter. Do you remember what happened to Peter after he was filled with the Spirit at Pentecost? He heals people. He heals people. He's imprisoned for speaking out. And while he's in prison, an angel comes and slaps him and tells him to wake up. You can tell how worried he was. Slaps him and tells him to wake up, and the chains fall off, and they walk out of the prison together. And he goes right back to preaching after he was told not to. It doesn't sound like the same guy we were talking about earlier, does it? Remember the vision with the unclean food? Peter was told what God makes clean is clean, and he was the first to bring the gospel to the Gentiles. He even raises someone from the dead. His ministry brought thousands to Christ. And even now, thousands of years later, we are still looking to the scriptures. We're reading about Peter, and we're identifying with what he had to say in his life. But sometimes we get caught up in the nonsense and the politics, the things happening. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be aware of those things. They threaten our future, and I understand that. And we should do all we can to assist to make them right. But what I am saying is that our focus should be on doing the things that we are called to do through the Spirit of God. Love others. Tell people about the love of God. With all that's going on, it's sometimes difficult and we lose our focus. Back in the early 2000s, I was very heavily involved in the music business. And in that business, we dealt with Christian artists. And I spent a lot of time with a lot of different Christian artists. And I found very quickly that some of them were very, very authentic. And what they sang and what they did matched. They were very authentic people. And some of them, that was not always the case. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of got out of that business. One of my favorite artists was a young man named Matthew West. And early in his career, he had an accident. He actually ran his arm through a glass window and cut himself severely and was told that he'd never play guitar again. And he healed. almost miraculously healed, and he plays just fine. Several years after that, he had a problem in his throat, and again was told that he probably would never sing again. And he's still singing and doing fine. And I think that Matthew West has something to say, and I think that God very much wants those words to be said. And you just heard those words a few minutes ago, and I want to read them to you. It says, I woke up this morning and I saw a world full of trouble. And I thought, how did we ever get so far down? How's it ever going to turn around? So I turned my eyes to heaven and I thought, God, why don't you do something? Well, I just couldn't bear the thought of people living in poverty. Children sold into slavery. That thought disgusted me. So I shook my fist at heaven and I said, God, why don't you do something? And he said, I did. I created you. If not us, then who? If not me and you? Right now, it's time for us to do something. If not now, then when will we see an end to all this pain? It's not enough to do nothing. It's time to do something. He says, the thought disgusted me. Have you ever thought about something that's going on in the world that just totally eats at you, disgusts you? Abortion, sex trafficking, drugs, alcohol. How much do you have to hurt before you say it's enough and you do something? I'm so tired of talking about how we're God's hands and feet, but it's easier to say than to be. Live like angels of apathy who tell ourselves, it's all right, somebody else will do something. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of life with no desire. I don't want a flame, I want a fire. I want to be the one that stands up and says, I'm going to do something. Lately, I've been feeling that exact same thing. I don't want a flame. I want a fire. Not only do I want a fire, I want a bonfire. I want a hot, blazing, burning fire, something that I can be a part of. No more smoldering in the ashes over at the side. I want to explode into a raging inferno. I want to be part of that. This morning in our Oak Grove service, one of the gentlemen spoke and he said, it's time for us to be discerning. And I'm telling you, no, that time's past. It's time for us to do something. It's time for us to be something. It's time for us to stand for something. And you say, but what can I do? I'm just an individual. I don't have much. I'm not wealthy. I don't have a lot of talent. I don't run in political circles. There are many, many out there who are afflicted, addicted, imprisoned, impoverished, and in despair, who simply need to know the love of Jesus. The love that you hear, all of us, the love that we know. We just need to show it to them. Simple enough. I have a couple of short stories that I'd like to illustrate. My mom is 95. 95. She'll be 96 in June. And she's beginning to tell things that I've never heard. You know, I think she's remembering is what I think it is. And she was telling me a story last Sunday about a time when we were going to church here, and there was a pastor that was here, and she felt the need, and she didn't know why, but she felt the need to simply write him a note of encouragement. she put it off for a day or two, and one day she wrote this note, and I don't know what the note said. She didn't tell me. But she said the following Sunday she went to church, and he came up and hugged her with tears in his eyes and said, "You have no idea what that meant to me." He said, "The people here were causing me grief," and he said, "I didn't think I could stay." And he thanked her. And this was an individual who was not prone to hugs and emotion. Sometimes when we get those feelings that says, I ought to go see so-and-so, or I ought to write a letter, or I ought to send a text, or an email, or just a card, or a phone call. Sometimes those are little hints from God, and you can choose to ignore them if you want, or you can do something. There's a girl named Rachel. I say she's a girl. She's 42, 43 now. Rachel was baptized at 10 years old. We went to a reunion down in South Missouri. And she was baptized there at 10 years old. She never much liked going to church, but she wanted to be baptized, and so she was baptized. When she was 13, she was experimenting with drugs and alcohol. And when she was 18, she was married. And by the time she was 20, she had 2 boys. She was divorced and lost custody of both the boys. She was dancing in some club somewhere. After that, she married a man who was 23 years older than her, had 2 more boys, and was pretty heavily involved in mostly alcohol, some drugs. Eventually, she was caught dealing drugs. The sheriff deputy caught her and took her to prison. And she spent, I think, 3 days in county jail there. Got out of jail, got slapped on the wrist and sent home. Several weeks later, the same deputy caught her again doing exactly the same thing in the same place, and he took her to jail again. So she's sitting in jail, and she had been there several days, and she's sitting there in jail, and he went to see her. This deputy went to see her, and he said, "Rachel, this is bad." He said, "You're going away this time." He said, "This is bad." He said, "Here's your options." He said, "You can go to jail, or you can go to rehab." He said, "If you choose to go to rehab," he said, "I'll go before the judge, and I'll stand up and I'll tell him that you're going to go to rehab, and I'll work this out, if that's what you're going to do." He said, "Those are your choices." And so she chose to go to rehab. So they came and got her, and they said, "You're going to rehab, and head for the door." And she walked out the door, and here stood this deputy in his private car, and he drove her to rehab. 90 days later, when she got out of rehab, he was waiting for her. And she got in the car, and he took her home. Before she got out of the car, he said, "Rachel," he said, "you've done a good thing, and I'm very proud of you." He said, "If I catch you again," he said, "I'll go before the judge, and I'll tell him to throw the book at you." He said, "This was your last shot." Rachel spent the next several years, she's still clean and sober to this day, by the way. But she spent the next several years, and everything she posted on Facebook was, "If you haven't walked in my shoes, then don't judge me." And it was kind of victim mentality, you know what I mean? You've probably seen those kind of things. The last few months, the things Rachel had been posting on Facebook is, "I am very blessed." She had 2 more boys, by the way. One of them just graduated from high school, and the other one graduates this year and they're fine young men, but her posts now are moving to a more religious, recognizing God, recognizing blessings in her life. And the greatest blessing in her life, and I don't know if she knows it or not, but one of the greatest blessings in her life is this sheriff deputy that did something. It wasn't much, but he recognized something in Rachel, and he did something. I've had a lot of failures in my life. I've done a lot of things wrong. I understand that. And one of these days I'm going to stand before my Maker and I'm going to be judged for those things, those failures. But the thing that frightens me most is to stand before my Maker and answer for those things that I should have done that I didn't. That worries me more. In the book of James, first chapter, verse 22, it says, we must become doers of the word. Doers of the word. We come to church and we sit and we listen and we hear the stories and we hear the scriptures and the word of God and all these things. And Satan doesn't care. He doesn't mind if you're sitting here in church. It's when you step outside that door and you begin to apply what you know, that's when Satan's going to get involved. That's when there's trouble. And sometimes we fool ourselves when we think that we've learned the truth, we've read and we've studied and we've internalized it. But do we have the courage to actually use it? Isn't it true sometimes that the greatest giant we face in life is our own insecurities and our own fears? Like Peter, a lot of times we let our fear kind of rule our life. We fail to do anything that we might think somebody might find offensive or might make us look funny or intrusive. Sometimes we're worried about being intrusive in people's lives. All I can tell you is go with your gut and let God worry about that. Most likely your gut inclination is God trying to tell you something anyway. Take what you know. Write a note of encouragement to someone hurting. Go visit. Give time to help the homeless, broken. If you look around and ask God, He'll show you what needs to be done, and He'll put you in a place. In 1829, Joseph Smith was given what we now call Section 4 of the Doctrine and Covenants, a verse that's very familiar to most of us. O ye that embark in the service of God, see that you serve Him with all your heart, might, mind, and strength, that ye may be able to stand blameless before God at the last day. Therefore, if you have any desires to serve God, ye are called to the work. For behold, the field is white, already to harvest. And if it was true then, I can't imagine a saying being more true than it is right now. Cannot. I hope that none of you have to face any giants with nothing more than 5 small stones and a small weapon. But if you do, just remember this. Like David, you won't face it alone. God will be right there with you. Put your trust in God and move out in faith, knowing that He's going to be there. And remember, the mightiest of heroes are not always those who are great warriors. Some of the greatest heroes are simply people like you and I who decide that they are going to do something. From 1 Samuel. David is having a conversation with Goliath. And this is the last thing he says to Goliath. This day, right now, this minute, this is going to happen. This day, the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. It's a bit violent, but... And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, and all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel and there is a God in Buckner. and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. May God bless you.